Disclaimer. The purpose of this film is not to give you professional Rockefeller propagandized medical advice regurgitated from controlled big pharma textbooks. Consult your nearest Rockefeller licensed doctor for any such drivel. Esoteric biochemistry. The secret. Potassium versus poison. The big secret and even bigger joke is, if you are afraid of COVID-19, you are simply afraid of yourself. Our medical books tell us that respiratory syncytial viruses, such as adenoviruses and coronaviruses, are outbreaks of the common cold due to respiratory syncytial virus peak during the winter and spring months. While in the one breath, these medical books tell us that coronaviruses are just the common cold, in the other breath, we are told we still don't really know the cause of the common cold. It's time we all lift the veil and learn. Know thyself, heal thyself. A look at any esoteric or even regular biochemistry book from before Rockefeller-controlled medicine took hold, such as this one around 1932.
Plants. Annette says the food in her garden is her fountain of youth.
My diet consists of fruits, nuts, vegetables, and seeds. I do a lot of sprouting of seeds, and as you can see from my garden, of course, these are the raw foods that I eat.
So how old is this size 4 beauty? Annette just turned 70 years old.
This one lady who is my age, she said, was telling her friend that I used to tell them about eating and they wouldn't listen. And her reply was to that, or her response to that was, look at her now and look at us.
Now, Annette has been eating completely raw for 27 years. Now, we want to remind everyone, no matter how old you think she really looks, she changed her lifestyle to feel better and have a good quality of life. And her
germ or so-called virus can only be a symptom of cellular breakdown due to an imbalance of the delicate alkaline pH balance of the body's fluids or oils, and not the cause of that breakdown. The statement is clear. Lack of potassium, or kalium as it is chemically known, in all three combinations causes virulent and poisonous diseases. If you've ever been down with the flu or a bad cold, you know very well how much activity is going on in this region to eject toxins, stuffy or runny nose, cough, fever, headache, etc. But you also know that if you go to the pharmacy, the first thing they do is give you Tamiflu, nasal sprays, cough suppressants, and a plethora of drugs that shut down your body's ability to eject toxins this way, leaving them running amok in your body, doing all kinds of irreparable cellular destruction. In the meantime, think of the role the lungs play in flu, colds, pneumonia, and all of these so-called respiratory viral diseases and deaths. People who are deficient in potassium sulfate suffer from virulent diseases and are easily poisoned by tainted foods. They should be extremely careful relative to their diet and toxic flu shots as well. As potassium sulfate acts as a fuel, deficiency in it will cause a person to feel suffocated. The biological transformation of blood or body cells is a natural process that takes place in an acidic environment of the interstitial fluids of the interstitium compartments, and then spilling over into the blood plasma via hydrostatic pressure caused by the buildup of dietary and metabolic acidic waste, which has not been properly eliminated by the lymphatic system via the 4 channels of elimination: urination, defecation, perspiration, and or respiration.
So this is an example of how you could be misled by your observations and assume that it's a contagious process that passes an illness between people, when in actuality it is that they had a common exposure to some kind of toxic insult that caused the problem. So I've tried very hard to find additional experiments where they tested this theory about contagion of infectious agents. And I could not find any conclusive studies that proved contagion exists.
Why viral? Because the people are poisoned, they excrete toxins, they look like viruses. People think it's a flu epidemic. In the 1918 epidemic, the Boston Health Department decided to investigate the contagiousness of this. You can read about this in a book called The Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Furstenberg, who chronicles all the steps in the electrification of the Earth and how within 6 months there was a new flu pandemic all over the world. And when you hear the normal explanations, how did it go from Kansas to South Africa in 2 weeks? So the entire world got the symptoms at the same time, in spite of the fact that the mode of transportation was horseback and boats, and there's no explanation for it. They just say, we don't know how that happened.
Germ theory has been so widely accepted as a fundamental principle that all of our other scientific knowledge is based upon. There has been no effort or funding or research done to look for an alternative cause.
And why do you think that is?
Well, from the point of view of scientists, since they accept that the virus causes the disease, there would be no point in doing other research to look at other potential causes. And so they spend their research efforts to learn more about these particles that they're calling viruses.
During the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, which was allegedly so contagious and deadly, it killed 50 or 60 million people in just a few months, scientific experiments weren't able to infect even one person or horse in many, many hundreds of attempts of prolonged intimate physical contact, even by injection. Let that sink in. Just for the record, 1918 was the coldest winter on record until 1938, 1960, and 1979. So people were indoors and lacking vitamin D from sun exposure. As Arthur Furstenberg wrote in The Invisible Rainbow, in 2001, Canadian astronomer Ken Tapping showed that the influenza pandemics over the previous 300 years correlated with peaks in solar magnetic activity on an 11-year cycle. Once again, 1918, 1938, 1960, and 1979 correlate. It has also been found that some outbreaks of influenza spread over enormous areas in just a few days, a fact that is difficult to explain by contagion from one person to another. Also, numerous experiments seeking to prove direct contagion through close contact, droplets of mucus, or other processes have proved fruitless. On top of that, 1918 was the first worldwide mass vaccination program. Dr. Eleanor McBean, author of The Poison Needle, was a young girl during the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. As she points out, the soldiers were getting sick and dying because they were given anywhere from 14 to 25 vaccine shots during the First World War. The environmental terrain of the 1700s was riddled with famine coming out of the Maunder Grand Solar Minimum. It was also a century of constant epidemics of iron and potassium nutritional deficiencies, understandably. In the 1720s, when leeches were used to bloodlet out evil spirits, inoculation came to Europe in hopes of curing the smallpox. You have to remember, biochemistry wasn't rediscovered until 100 years later. Inoculation was done by inserting or rubbing powdered smallpox scabs or fluid from pustules into superficial scratches made in the skin. Seeing as pustules are poisonous toxins trapped in mucus that the body is trying to eject through the skin, unsurprisingly, the patient would develop pustules identical to those caused by natural occurring smallpox, since the doctor just rubbed the exact same poisonous toxins into that area. After about 2 to 4 weeks, the patient's symptoms would subside after removing the poisons rubbed into them, indicating to the doctors successful recovery and immunity. And this is the scientific basis for the reason you're locked in your house and social distancing.